Hello, welcome to the Benzie Area Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum. I'm Rick Coates, president of the Benzie Chamber, and we want to thank our sponsor tonight, Consumers Energy. Our candidates forum features Democrat Beth McGill-Rizer and Republican Jack O'Malley running for the Michigan 101st House seat. I will serve as your moderator, and joining me on the panel is Amy Erforth, who is the new superintendent of Benzie Central Schools, and Steve Mitchell, vice president of commercial lending with Honor Bank. Now, the purpose of this forum is to let voters of Benzie County get to know both candidates better by learning their positions on some key issues that impact both businesses and residents of Benzie County. But we also feel that this information will benefit the voters of Leelanau, Manistee, and Mason counties, which is part of the district, who share similar rural challenges as we do here in Benzie County. These questions were prepared by the Government Relations Committee of the Benzie Area Chamber of Commerce. So I'll go over just some simple rules. So for those of you who are at home watching, you know where we're standing when we're presenting the questions. So each candidate will get an opportunity to give an overview of themselves and what they hope to do in Lansing. That'll be their opening statement for 3 minutes. There's a total of 9 questions, and each candidate will get 2.5 minutes to respond to that question, up to 2.5 minutes. You'll probably see at some point me raising up signs. They don't show up, but there's a 30-second sign for the candidates and a 10-second sign. But when they see that, they know that they're running out of time. So, and just outside of that, we're excited to move forward. And at the end, each candidate will have 3 minutes to give their closing remarks. So I would like to now turn it over to Steve Mitchell, who will present the first question.
Are we going to do opening statements? Are we going to do opening statements?
Yeah, I'm sorry. My mistake. Yep. See, look at it. We've already made a mistake, and it was on me, and I'm the one that has the agenda in front of me. Yeah, so we are going to start with opening statements, and so I apologize. Candidate McGill-Rizer, you may go first.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Let's get Michigan back on the road to recovery. The best way to do that is to get people back to work. Expanding and rebuilding our infrastructure will be the starting point for us. Working with legislators throughout the state, I will prioritize getting people back to work safely. We need to work for economic justice. Our economy will be more robust if it's fairer. We must strive for a living wage so all Michiganders can meet their basic needs for food, shelter, clothing, transportation, and utilities. COVID-19 exposed holes in our safety net. Rural healthcare struggles will worsen if the Affordable Care Act is repealed, leaving many in rural Michigan without expanded Medicaid services. I hope that the federal government will move to make sure that all Americans receive the health care we need. Healthcare should be a right for all, not just a privilege for some. It is the state's job to prepare for that day. We need to strengthen broadband internet to support telehealth services for our district. We need to create career ladders for students that show interest in the healthcare professions. We need to improve vocational and cooperative education opportunities so students can prepare for immediate employment upon graduation or go on further to get education in the healthcare professionals. We need to create communities that those graduates want to come back to and offer them loan forgiveness for years of service. I'll prioritize strengthening our public education from cradle to career. Learning is for our lifetime. Education begins with safe, quality childcare services. We need to help working families find affordable, high-quality childcare. We must improve access and make it affordable while ensuring providers are supported and make a living wage. Studies show that early education impacts a person's success in life. We must provide universal preschool as part of our public education system, not just something that some can afford. Our schools must achieve equity before they can achieve equality. We must acknowledge the role that poverty has in education and take steps to combat it. We need to invest in our students and our educators. Protecting our air, water, and land is essential to our district. Our natural resources attract tourists to our communities. Remote workers now know that they can live where they only vacationed once before. And we must continue to protect ourselves from polluters by holding them accountable.
Thank you, candidate McGill-Rizer. And now, candidate O'Malley, your opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Rick. And I want to thank the Benzie Chamber and, of course, Consumers Energy for hosting tonight. It's very important. And I want to give a virtual fist bump to my opponent, Beth, since this is an odd setting here. Normally, we get to shake hands and things like that, but maybe an elbow bump. But Beth, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you, Jack.
You know, it's interesting. Having been in the legislature now for 2 years, you learn a lot in those first 24 months, close to 24 now. And I was told once that you wear two hats when you get elected. One's a legislator, and that's in Lansing. And the other is a representative in district. And when I'm knocking doors, when I'm talking to people, there's a lot of folks who are upset with what's going on in Washington, and there's plenty to be upset there. But you need to know that this job is Lansing and the state. There are things that come in from the federal government, but so much of that is dictated that as an individual, you don't have a whole lot to work with. And so you have to kind of react or deal with it as it is. So that's the Lansing part of it. But being a representative is also working with the people in the 101st. And I have traveled many a mile in these first 2 years, even with COVID, a little different, but you use the Zoom and that sort of thing. And you stay in touch with the local leaders. You talk to the area chambers. You talk to the county commissioners and that sort of thing. And your job is to work for the people of the district. And I believe I have, and I'm going to continue doing that, from high water permits, because that's a whole issue that's kind of been lost in the COVID situation, to helping hundreds and hundreds of residents in this district with a very messed up unemployment situation. So you stay on those things. So I believe I can put my record up with anybody. Nobody in this state, there's a lot of great representatives in this state, but nobody's worked harder than I have. And I want to continue that. And, you know, when I started this, you know, I jokingly said my life expectancy is 6 years. Well, you know, it's down to 4, and I hope you give me at least another 2 so I can continue, because I will continue to work hard for you, both in Lansing and in the district. And, you know, some of the topics we'll hit tonight, I think we'll be able to highlight that. But, you know, again, I think I've done a good job keeping you informed, up to date, and there for you. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to continuing as your representative. So thank you.
All right, thank you, candidate O'Malley. Now I will turn it over to Steve Mitchell for the very first question.
Candidate McGill-Rizer, what are your budget priorities, and what would be your plan to address prospective revenue shortfalls for the 2021-22 budget?
So my budget priorities reflect my legislative priorities. So infrastructure, especially broadband, healthcare, and education. There are going to be shortfalls in our budget, and we are going to have to look at that budget. We're going to have to look at all the budgets in the state and try and figure out what can we do without. We're going to have to make some cuts, and it's going to hurt. No one's going to get out of this unscathed. I'm not naive in that respect. So we're going to have to evaluate the needs for goods and services that we purchase. Are they really necessary? We need to get people back to work so that they can increase the revenue that we have. That's what pays for all of our budget items, is revenue. We're a consumer-driven economy. When working people have money, they spend it. They spend it on rent and groceries. They spend it on gas, other means of transportation. They spend nearly every dollar they make. When they get a little bit of extra, what do? They go out to your local restaurants, theaters, local putt-putt golf. They spend their money in their communities. The other thing that I would do is let's not leave any money on the table. Make sure we accept all the federal assistance that we can, and make sure that we're availing ourselves of grants and public and private entities. And if we have to, let's use the rainy day fund. We are in the midst of a storm that isn't over yet. Use the money if we need to. That's what it's there for.
Thank you very much, Candidate McGill-Rizer. Candidate O'Malley, what are your budget priorities, and what would be your plan to address prospective revenue shortfalls for the 2021-22 budget?
Well, as you look ahead, we are in a situation where we still don't really know where we're at for this coming year in 2021. So we'll wait and see. Things with the latest revenue estimate, things look better, but we still don't know. One of the things that, again, I focus on, there's the state level and then there's the local level. I worry about what's going to happen with the people in this district and our economy because our economy is so small business oriented. And the COVID and many of the restrictions that have been placed on small businesses has hurt. So, I've heard anywhere from estimates of, 25+% of businesses, small businesses, won't reopen and or won't make it into next spring. They'll kind of labor through. So those are issues that we still don't know what lies ahead. So that's hard to say. I would argue, though, or argue for the fact that obviously we have to make sure that our priorities are met: education, healthcare, roads. That was one that kind of got stuck in the COVID situation. But I believe there are sensible ways to adjust how we spend that road money so that we can work on fixing the pavement. So there's lots of things ahead, but still many unanswered questions that lie ahead. But I think that we've got to recover from COVID first before we really know exactly where we're at. And when I say recover from COVID, I'm with true respect to the health situation, I'm talking about our economic hit, because we've had a couple of patients in COVID. We've had our health patient and we've had our economic patients who have really been hit hard. So lots of things that we can hope for and plan for, but we've still got to see what it looks like on the other side of the woods. So thanks for the sign, Rick. I'm good.
Awesome. All right. So the second question is about broadband, and Candidate O'Malley, you will go first. I should shut the alarm off there. Limited or no access to broadband has constrained economic growth, educational opportunities, healthcare opportunities, as well as remote work opportunities here in Benzie County. How would you address increasing broadband access for businesses and residents in Benzie County?
Well, again, Benzie County isn't just an island unto itself. So if we're able to help Benzie, we're going to be able to help other parts of rural Michigan. So I'll start there and then maybe focus in a little bit. One of the things I think is that we do need COVID. If there's been some good out of COVID, one of the things it has shown to a lot of people in other parts of the state is that if we want an equal type of education, we do need to get rural internet and broadband taken care of. And if we're going to be able to someday, everybody talks about we can do away with with snow days because we'll be able to go to a remote learning when we need to. Well, hopefully that's the case, but we're going to need that internet. So I'm hoping that COVID really addresses a problem that our legislators and locals have been screaming about for a lot of years. And again, I believe that we need to get our federal folks, our senators and our Congress folk, involved in this fight. And we need almost, and it's not just Michigan, there's other states that have this issue. We need almost a Tennessee rural authority approach to this so that we can get some support from the federal government, but yet using our locals. Many of our energy providers, several of them here in the north, are helping to set up that ring. They don't necessarily want to be internet providers, but they're willing to set that access up because they already have that in their system. So I think that's a very important part of this. And again, it's difficult too, because we do live in a rural part of the area. You can't just run a line from one house to another because it might be several miles between a home. So I believe there needs to be that big picture. I think we need to get all the players in the room. I'm a big believer in discussion. And I think we need to get the players in Northern Michigan and the state and our federal partners in a room to sit down and say, all right, how do we start to address this situation?
All right, thank you, Candidate O'Malley. Candidate McGill-Rizer, I'll quickly repeat the question. Limited or no access to broadband has constrained economic growth, educational, healthcare, and remote work opportunities in Benzie County. How would you address increasing broadband access for businesses and residents within Benzie County?
Forbes estimates that 90 million Americans don't have access to high-speed internet. And if you use their figure, you can take a 10% average of Michiganders that don't have access to the internet. That's 1 million people that don't have access to broadband internet. We were those people for a while. We were using a hotspot. As I started campaigning, I was trying to campaign off a hotspot. The straw that broke the camel's back was getting kicked off 3 times in 30 minutes. Can you imagine if you're trying to teach your child at home, the frustration that a parent and a child, or now that some of the classrooms are going to be remote, that a teacher must feel trying to teach during that process? The solutions to possible broadband expansions are, we can keep doing what we're doing and offer incentives, but if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you've got. Or we can look at it as a public utility, just like we look at our water, our sewer, our electricity. It could be a possible revenue source for our public school systems or municipalities. My first experience with the internet was when my 5th grader brought home a piece of paper and said, "Here, Mom, sign us up for the internet." And it was through the school district. That was the days of dial-up. Broadband should be a right, not a privilege, because we will start picking winners and losers in education. We'll pick winners and losers in acquiring food services, and we'll pick winners and losers in who gets health care, who lives and who dies.
Thank you.
My question is on infrastructure. This is going out to you, candidate McGill-Rizer. Lack of consistent infrastructure, including natural gas, sewers, energy, and telecommunications, has been a barrier to economic growth in Benzie County. What would your approach be for improving rural infrastructure?
We need a comprehensive plan for the whole state. Michigan's infrastructure needs to be expanded and it needs to be repaired. We have to work in unity with other legislators because I'm going to want something and they're going to want something. And that we have to do in a united way. We need to work with each of our communities and identify their priorities. What do they need the most?
Thank you, candidate McGill-Rizer. Same question for you, candidate O'Malley. Lack of consistent infrastructure, including natural gas, sewers, energy, and telecommunications, has been a barrier to economic growth in Benzie County. What would your approach be for improving rural infrastructure?
Well, first of all, Amy, let me congratulate you on your new post. Well deserved. You're going to be a great superintendent of Benzie Schools, so congratulations on that. So lots of angles here. Let's start, with sewage. One of the things I think is we have a rural district, rural community. And so some of the things that we're talking about just come along, by way of taxes and whatnot in a bigger city. Let's use Traverse City, for example. It's a municipality, it's a city, but we have a much more rural population and setting in Benzie County. So maybe some of these things aren't under the exact same thought process that you would in a big city. For example, I've been working with, and again, I'm sorry, but so much of this got stopped by COVID. I was trying and working with some groups to talk about a statewide septic code. Now, that is almost like bringing two warring factions together. So that's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. But we need to look at that because septic systems are a way of life in rural Michigan. Natural gas, again, something that if we can make it happen, that would be good. But again, you've got to get this line from here to there. So I think that's, this all takes money. So we've got to be able to work with our partners, our energy folks, all of that. And when we talk about, jobs and that sort of thing, if we can attract some different businesses or help the businesses that are near us, that are already here, that allows us to maybe as we expand, bring those lines of, say, natural gas or whatever a little bit closer to where they're needed, and then everybody can tap off of that. So again, this is something where if the state can help with some type of grants or funding, we move forward. But we also have to realize we live in a rural area, and some of this, it might not be as easy as we'd like it to be, but it'd sure be nice if we'd be able to pull it off. But again, we have to balance. Do we want that rural feel, or do we want maybe that municipality type feel where some of these things are easier to run? So again, it's a topic that needs to continue to be discussed.
Thank you, Candidate O'Malley.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is related to affordable housing. And Candidate O'Malley, I'll start with you on this question. In a Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance focus group comprised of residents who recently moved to the region, participants noted the availability of affordable housing is a barrier to life in the region. How do you intend to address the lack of affordable housing?
Well, I remember almost 40 years ago when I first moved up to Northern Michigan, it was 1984, and finding affordable housing then, comparative salaries, wasn't easy because this is just, again, the area we live in. We live in a very popular area. The cost of housing, one way you could say, okay, nobody else come up, stop buying houses. Well, that's not going to happen. So are we able to partner with our bigger employers to maybe build some type of workforce housing? Are we talking about just more housing for the average worker as opposed to specific workforce housing? Well, here's another problem. A developer can't just build, a dozen $180,000 homes. It just doesn't work. So one of the things I think that we need to discuss is, of course, affordable housing. It's affordable as to what you can afford. So if we can get our wages up, that'll help. But something else, considering the way we like to live, we social distance by choice up here. A thought that I was starting to talk to the transit folks about before all of this hit, and I plan to pick it up in the second term, is something that, like for the 101st, this works in Flint, and I find it intriguing, and I want to go down and visit that area. How about people live where they live in communities outside of our bigger cities, Ludington, Manistee, Frankfort, wherever, Traverse City, and we have a regional public transit system that helps get workers to those plants. Currently, they have a system, and I can't remember the name of the town. I think it's Brighton, but please, I might be wrong. They've got all kinds of jobs, but no workers. They've got workers and no jobs in Flint. So they've worked out a deal where the employer helps subsidize some of that cost. The worker, pays their fare, and they're able to take those workers to that workplace. So it might not be the same scale, but I think we need to look at some different avenues. And I think a regionalized transportation system might be something that we should seriously look at.
Thank you, Candidate O'Malley. Candidate McGill-Rizer, I'll ask you the same question. In a Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance focus group comprised of residents who recently moved to the region, participants noted the availability of affordable housing as a barrier to life in the region. How do you intend to address the lack of affordable housing?
First of all, you have to identify your underlying issues. Builders are building fewer houses. Why are builders building fewer houses? Well, for one, they don't need to build as many houses because of the cost. They're getting good prices. But a bigger problem is the lack of workers. Now, we built our home when we moved here in 2017. It took twice as long as was estimated, which we'd already figured it was going to be 2 times more than that. But part of it was because I had to wait for the next subcontractor to be able to work. And sometimes they just weren't available. So we have fewer builders, we have fewer contractors. We actually have fewer workers now. Immigration has reduced our available workers by 20%. Something else we can do is provide vocational technical training, because that was one of the things as I talked to my builder, what was the issue? And they said, people don't know how to do these jobs. They're not interested in doing these jobs. So we need to be introducing more vocational education to allow students to participate in skilled trades, in construction, plumbing, electrical. We need to work with communities to encourage new construction for starter homes. 180,000 sounds like a lot for a starter home to me. And if you're a working person, that's a lot of money. So we need to work within our communities. We need to encourage new homes that are starter homes. Zoning is a stumbling block for that. For instance, we were going to build 2 tiny homes, one for my mother, one for us. But because of zoning, we weren't allowed to do that. Let's look at making some of those restrictions a little looser. Prices are driven down by scarcity. Let's reduce the number of people looking for new homes by creating incentives for them to stay in their current homes. And for workforce housing, I had a kid who worked on Mackinac Island, and they lived in an apartment above the business there. There are opportunities to build dormitories and provide regional housing for workers.
Thank you, Candidate McGill-Rizer.
Our next question is on childcare. This question is going out to candidate McGill-Rizer. Childcare is a barrier to individuals entering the workforce and for our employers to find qualified employees. How would you work to increase access to affordable and quality childcare in Northern Michigan?
The median cost for infant childcare in Michigan is $905 a month. And for a 4-year-old, it's $741 a month for a 4-year-old. Can you imagine that? If you had 2 children and you're making a minimum wage, how are you going to pay for that? So we need to look at ways to increase wages so that people are making a living wage. And we need to find ways to subsidize that childcare. I have a cousin who is a child care center director, and I asked her some of the things that makes her job harder. And she brought up that the fire inspector requires her not to have certain things on the wall. But when she gets her inspection for licensing, those things have to be on the wall. So she has to hang them up for the fire inspection, but take them down for the the licensing inspection. Let's make things easier. Let's go through those regulations, make sure that they make sense. The best way to do that is to talk to people like my cousin who run child care centers. They're the experts. They know the conflicting rules. Sometimes we only see one side of the rules because that's what we're working on. But the child care centers, they have to keep track of all of it. So let's talk to them and find out what solutions they want. We need to increase payments to providers. Another thing that she brought up was that the people who work for her are required to have continuing education, and on what they make, it's really expensive. How about if the state helps out with that continuing education?
Thank you. Candidate O'Malley, this question is for you. Childcare is a barrier to individuals entering the workforce and for our employers to find qualified employees. How would you work to increase access to affordable and quality childcare in Northern Michigan?
Working on it. So 2 years ago during this campaign, I was knocking doors and people would talk about, health insurance and roads, or car insurance and roads. And then they talk about childcare. Well, my children are grown, so I wasn't really into it. So I started asking questions. And over the last 2 years, I've had work groups where I sat down with providers, early child folks in the district, folks, and said, what do we need? Well, what I found is that there are several types of childcare. There's in-home, which is 1 adult to 6 kids, group homes, 2 adults to 12 kids, or childcare centers. The vast majority of rural Michigan, and the 101st, is in-home daycare. Child centers tend to be in larger communities, and that would include Manistee. Grand Traverse Band has childcare in Ludington and Traverse City, but the smaller communities don't. And Beth is absolutely right. Regulations have to be fixed. Lara is in charge, along with DHHS and Department of Ed, 3 of the biggest monolithic organizations there are out there. And the vast majority of our daycare, especially in rural, are in home. And what's been happening is, because of that regulation and the high cost, our number of in-home daycare providers in rural Michigan is almost gone. So we have got to build that up. Now, regulation is a big part of it, but first of all, we also need to get the average daycare provider, in-home daycare provider, makes about 20 grand, give or take, about $10 an hour is what they end up making it. And this business is in their home. So I helped write 3 bills. One would increase the ratio per adult in an in-home, 1 child to an adult. So that would make 7. In a group home, 1 child to each adult. So that would go up 2. And we would also add extra for before and after care, allowing a little extra so they can make money, plus parents would have more children. And we have a bill that would say no regulation can go into effect, or they can't be enforced until 90 days after it went into effect, to allow those in-home providers time to make sure they got all those rules in place. So this is just the beginning. There's a lot more to come, and I look forward to championing daycare issues in my second term.
Thank you, Candidate O'Malley.
You bet.
Early childhood education is the next topic. And Candidate O'Malley, what are your thoughts on early childhood education, and how do you see it being funded? So
that's a good question. And, it's interesting because the world today is not like the childhood I grew up in. Families, it's a different situation. 2 parents are working. So I see where there is a need for early childhood. And that connects with daycare, because I think part of our issue is a lot of people want, in bigger parts of the state, they want these children into childcare centers because that's where the early childhood development can begin. Problem is, in rural Michigan, we don't have the population for that. So that's part of the reason why in-home daycares have been taking it on the chin, because that's not really been the focus. So I think that, I don't know exactly how it would look. Do we have a 2-year kindergarten, or maybe instead of starting at 5 years old, we have it start at 4? That's something that we can talk about in education, because I do think that I'm just looking at the questions here. The education funding is an interesting animal, and I think it can be done. I think communities also have to pitch in, and I know that like in Leelanau County, there was a millage for that. So this is beginning. But I do believe that there is a definite need for that early childhood. And right now, I kind of lean towards that 2-year kindergarten type of a setup. But I'm not saying that that's the the beginning and the end. I think it's an interesting way to go. Makes sense to me, just in how our system is already built with kindergarten, first grade, and so on. That second kindergarten year or first kindergarten year makes sense to me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Candidate McGill-Rizer, what are your thoughts on early childhood education and how do you see it being funded?
My husband and I, my husband made a third career choice to go to medical school while I worked full time. And we had children at the time. And we had what was called a day mama. That was what all the kids called her. It was an in-home childcare. But she also provided early childhood education for our kids. She also loved our kids, and you don't always find that. But we have to make early childhood education available for all children. We know that early childhood education is an opening for the rest of a person's life. And if that's the case, how can we pick the winners and the losers just because somebody can afford it? So what we need to do is we need to make early childhood education for all 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And it needs to become part of our public school education system. Therefore, we're going to have to fund that through the school system.
Thank you.
Candidate McGill-Rizer, this question is on school funding. What is the long-term solution to adequately funding our schools? And what would be your plan for closing the per pupil funding gap that currently exists?
I'm not sure that long-term solution is an answer, because I think our educational system continues to change. And if nothing else, COVID-19 certainly showed us that. I think that we do have to have some versatility, and as time changes, we have to be able to change with it. That means that our funding methods are also going to have to change with it. But one thing that we're going to have to do is equity over equality to begin with. We cannot provide equal education to children who are living in poverty. One of the biggest stumbling blocks in education is poverty. It's hard to learn when you're cold. It's hard to learn when you're tired. It's hard to learn when you're hungry. So we need to deal with poverty. It's the elephant in the room. And that means it's going to take more money. The school funding formula needs to reflect student needs. We need to reduce testing, which is expensive and, in my opinion, an abysmal failure. And we need smaller classes to allow teachers to determine the competency, not a test. Now, test taker, I have kids who are in graduate school. One who's graduated from graduate school and one who's in graduate school. They were terrible test takers, but they're good students. And one's gone on to have a great job. Let's start looking to our teachers to determine what competency is versus these pen and paper tests. Let's save us some money and spend that money on our teachers and our students.
Thank you, Candidate McGill-Rizer. Candidate O'Malley, this is your question. What is the long-term solution to adequately funding our schools? And what would your plan be for closing the per pupil funding gap that currently exists?
Well, I have 2.5 minutes, right? So this is a massive question, but here I'm going to go. Bear with me here. Here's what I've witnessed. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but last year, our budget was $15.2 billion for education. Let's not talk per pupil for a second. Follow me here. $15.2 billion. That's a lot of money. Michigan was about 10th in total spending, 15.2 billion. There were 40 states below us in spending. But yet when we look at results, Michigan was down here. That means the vast majority of them spent less but got better. So one of the things I think that is very important is that we need to change the structure. I believe the funding is there. The question is, whenever it's answered, people say more money, more money, more money. We need to change the structure. There needs to be more accountability at the state level. Our state school board focuses, they all come from the southern third of the state, nobody from the north. There's things we can do there. Our superintendent is answerable to that school board that really isn't answerable to anybody. I'd like to see the school superintendent, state superintendent, answerable to the governor, and the school board more answerable to the people. You can do that by setting up almost districts, and each district represent a school board, because the way they think about and need schools in the UP are different than they need in Birmingham. Also, I think that our schools need to have more local control. I think our school boards know what's going on. COVID has proven that with our back to school plan. Let the local folks decide, because what's going on in Birmingham ain't the same as in Ishpeming. So I think our local teachers, our local school boards, our local parents should have more say in that. And I think the feds need to get out of education for the most part. Let's face it, we got to have some standards, but less federal regulation, more more state, but definitely more local. And when it comes to money, we always talk about money. I think it is time to take a look at how that structure is built. And I do agree that we need to look at the local schools that have certain needs, the poorer kids, or maybe lower grade averages. We need to get them more money, to help boost those things up. But structure, we need to fix the structure, because I think ultimately that's the problem. We've been throwing more money at schools for a very long time. Did I make it in 2.5 minutes?
You did. Thank you, candidate O'Malley.
You're very welcome.
Okay. This next question is on tourism funding, and we will start with you, candidate O'Malley. Tourism is the primary economic driver in Benzie County and really throughout your districts, the counties in the district of the 101st. What are your thoughts on Pure Michigan? Do you consider funding it a priority? Prior to this year, Pure Michigan received $36 million in funding annually. Would you support returning to that figure for the next budget?
I don't know what the exact figure would be, because they're still working on that. But let me just say the answer to all your questions is yes. When the governor slashed it last year and took it completely out, stunned everybody. The thing that was forgotten in that was everybody said, well, it's rural Michigan. That's all neat. No, Detroit is the comeback city in this state. And if we don't have advertising, if we don't have that arm, nobody knows Detroit's the comeback city. So it's not just about rural Michigan. It's about Detroit. It's about Grand Rapids. It's about the entire state. I also think of Michigan, Pure Michigan, as a prideful thing for the people of Michigan. When you heard those spots come on, that was a world-class campaign, and we just slashed it. That was foolish. But yes, I think that if you don't reach out and reach people and bring them to our state, we're losing out. And some people say, well, the tourism industry should pay for that. And I'm not opposed to some type of group or segment that's paid. But how do you reach out to tourism? Is that tourism in Michigan is everything from the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island, Marquee, to Walt's Crawlers. How do you tax that? So I think that by all the money that you bring in, and the return on the dollar, I don't remember the numbers for Pure Michigan, was huge. I sent the bill to the governor just before the end of the year, asking for the reinstatement of Pure Michigan. I'm talking to the folks on the budget front, and I think things are good there. The exact number, I don't know, and I'll leave that up to the people that are right now discussing budget, because I don't know what's there. But heck yes, I'm for Pure Michigan, and I hope they can give it every dollar that they can spare.
All right, thank you, candidate O'Malley. Candidate McGill-Rizer, tourism is a primary economic driver in Benzie County and throughout the 101st District. What are your thoughts on Pure Michigan? Do you consider funding it a priority? And prior to this year, Pure Michigan received $36 million in funding annually. Would you support returning to that figure?
I love the Pure Michigan program. I travel a lot between downstate and upstate, and the billboards are fantastic. But it isn't in my top 3 priorities unless you tie it to infrastructure, and that's a bit of a stretch. I went to do a little research on this, and it was really hard to find the numbers. Now, the return on investment was stated to be $8.33 for every dollar invested. However, there's no place to prove that other than somebody said. There aren't any reports to be read. So it's an unsubstantiated claim. Now, if that's true, that's a great return on investment. But the Mackinac Center says that that's not true. They said that that didn't include the expense of the program. So who's right? I'm not sure. I couldn't find anything that showed me one way or the other. It needs to be more transparent so that we can find out if in fact that's true. And if it is, then that's a great investment. But if it's not, then we need to think about how we're spending our money. Because of that, I can't commit to the full increase of funding it. I do think we need the program. We do need to attract people to our communities. When I visited other states, I've seen the commercials for Pure Michigan, and it does bring people here. But especially right now, when we are going to be looking at budget shortages, we have to decide if that's a good investment for us.
Thank you, candidate McGill-Rizer.
The next topic is COVID, and I will address the question initially to candidate McGill-Rizer. What initiatives would you support to minimize the economic toll any potential future pandemic would have on Michigan businesses?
I'm a retired healthcare worker. I spent the majority of my career, I started out actually in vocational school as a medical assistant. As a result of that training, I started working in the hospital as a pharmacy technician. Then I went through college, and as a result of my college education, I was able to be promoted to a trainer. So I spent a good number of years in healthcare. This is a healthcare problem. This is something that we need to approach as a public health care emergency. Unfortunately, that's not the way it was addressed. If it had been addressed in that fashion, we probably wouldn't be asking this question because we wouldn't have had the impact that we currently have. I'm uncomfortable with this because I see it as a health crisis, and I see that it's been politicized. And I see that our businesses are suffering as a result. We can replace people's livelihoods. We can help rebuild businesses. But what we can't do is we can't restore the lives of the loved ones that they lost. The other day, I was talking to a woman. She was crying because she had lost a niece and a friend, both in their 50s, neither with underlying health conditions. Both of them passed away due to COVID-19. We need to follow the evidence, and we need to learn from history so that the next time a pandemic occurs, that we're better prepared and that we can stop it like we stopped Ebola. We had 2 people die from Ebola, and I believe there were 14 cases overall. So we need to partner with the federal government to ensure that there's a national response to a public health crisis. And then we also need to create our own response because as we've seen, we didn't get any federal response initially. And as a result of that, 200,000 people are dead. We need to make sure that we produce PPE in Michigan and that businesses have access to it at a reasonable cost.
Thank you, candidate McGill-Rizer. Candidate O'Malley, I'll ask you the same question. What initiatives would you support to minimize the economic toll any potential future pandemic would have on Michigan businesses?
So initiatives that would support or minimize economic toll. Okay, I'll focus on that. First of all, repeal the 1945 law so that we don't have unilateral control by a chief executive. I believe in our house system, our two legislative system, and I think that has been negated to the point where many executive orders have crippled business in the state of Michigan, including this very district, including Mason County, that was held down even longer than other parts of my district and our district. And businesses, I'm on the COVID oversight committee, and I've heard from many businesses that are saying, we've had our protocols in place. We're able to open safely. We can do this, but they weren't given the science and the data to prove why it was. They had the protocols. So I think our businesses need to have two branches of functioning government, not just one. I also think, kick back to the Pure Michigan campaign. I think Pure Michigan would ask the businesses in this district. They're going to say Pure Michigan helps. And so we need it now more than ever to get these districts, get people back in our district and things functioning again for our economic situation, because they talk about the areas that are going to lag the most in recovery: service and hospitality. Let's think about that. That's the 101st. So if we're talking about economic toll, I think let's not allow one person to be able to shut down massive parts. We can do this together. We can do this safely. Now, if you want to talk health, I agree. We have a health issue and we have a business issue. And in that business issue, there were health issues. There were increased suicides. There were people whose lives were being lost, whose lives were being lost, their businesses. The mental strain that put on us. I'm hearing stories, I don't have any exact numbers, but suicides are up in this district and attempted suicides are up. I call that a health crisis too. So get me fired up on this. Yes, we can do things to help our businesses, but this whole COVID response has really been shaky, and I'm being kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate O'Malley.
You bet.
Candidates, thank you for your time this evening. We are now to our closing statements. Each of you will have 3 minutes to give your final statement on why voters should cast their vote for you. Rick will hold up a sign when you have 30 seconds left, when you have 10 seconds left, and he will ring a bell when your time is up. Candidate O'Malley, you may go first.
Thank you. Well, again, thank you to the Chamber and to consumers for hosting this tonight. And Beth, it's good to see you here tonight. So, yeah, I want to be your representative. I told you 2 years ago that I want to serve. This is my 6-year hitch. And I think that I have served well these first couple of years. COVID threw a curveball, and I have stayed in touch with people in the 101st. I have answered question upon question. Yes, you can ride your motorcycle to work. Yes, you can do this. No, you can't do that. Yes, you can have a couple of people in your house. And the list goes on and on. I've taken calls from family members who haven't been able to go see the loved one who's in the hospital or the nursing home. I've reached out. I've tried to work with agencies. Why? Because that's my job as a representative, and I take it seriously. Yeah, there are things in Lansing that I still would like to get done. I've got my emergency management bill, which is a whole nother thing. Maybe we could do a forum on that. But I want to continue to work for you, and I ask for that vote. I think I've done an excellent job, and I continue. 2 years ago, I said, I can't promise you results. I'm one of 110, but I can promise you effort. And I believe for the last almost 2 years, I have given you every ounce of effort I got, and I plan to continue to do that. So I ask for your vote on November 3rd, and if you choose to elect me and have me represent you again, I will be one very proud individual to represent the Fighting 101. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Candidate O'Malley. Now, Candidate McGill-Rizer, you may begin.
Thank you for inviting me tonight. I have to confess, this is my first forum as a candidate. I've never done this before. And I appreciate the opportunity to exchange ideas and to listen to Jack's ideas. You know, I visited Jack at his coffee hours, and I will, if he's reelected, I will continue to do that. And if I'm elected, I hope that he will join me as well.
I'll come see you.
All right, I appreciate that. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm a grandmother. And all my children and grandchildren benefited from the Affordable Care Act. And after the 2016 election, I knew that they were going to be adversely affected by that. Now, I had voted, I'd signed petitions, I'd gone to protests, I donated money, I volunteered on campaigns, and I was a good keyboard warrior. Upon returning to Ludington, I connected with the local Democratic Party and I volunteered. I'm a member of the executive committee. I am a precinct delegate in the Victory Township. I volunteered on a state Senate campaign in 2018, and I was asked to run for the State House of Representatives, and I agreed after researching it and discussing it with my family. I believe that strong communities require a robust economy with a modern infrastructure that creates good paying jobs and protects our environment at the same time. We need public schools that provide students with an excellent education and makes them workplace ready and prepared for their next educational journey. We must pay educators fairly and recognize and reward their professionalism. We need to retain teachers and recruit new teachers. COVID-19 showed us how fragile our healthcare system is and how important it is to keep our rural hospitals open and to attract providers to our area. As our national leaders move towards health coverage for everyone, our state legislators must make sure our state is ready as well. I believe strong communities exist because of strong leadership, and strong leaders collaborate, are change agents, and provide a vision. My experience in healthcare, the United States Army, as a small business owner and a community leader, demonstrate my strong leadership skills. It's these skills that I will take to Lansing to make sure that the residents of the 101st remain healthy, safe, and represented. I'm asking for your vote to represent you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate McGill-Rizer, and thank you, candidate O'Malley, for participating in our first ever Zoom forum. And candidate McGill-Rizer, you were saying this was your first forum. Well, this is our first forum in this kind of environment. So it was a little clunky, but that was on my end. I learned something that I needed somebody else to run the time clock and keep my papers organized and all of that. But certainly want to thank both of you for running positive campaigns and keeping both of your campaigns focused on the issues of the 101st District. So we appreciate that. Want to thank Consumers Energy for sponsoring this forum tonight, and the Government Relations Committee of the Benzie Area Chamber of Commerce. And then the panelists who joined me, Amy Erforth, who is the new superintendent of Benzie Central Schools, and then Steve Mitchell, who is the vice president of commercial lending with Honor Bank. So thank you to the viewers. We hope that you were able to take away a lot of information this evening that will help you make your choice, and remember to vote on November 3rd. That's it. Now the awkward sign off here. There's no mic drop or that. I guess I just hit end and we're done. So thank you.
We
Good
hope.
night.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.